Welcome to Business in the Kingdom. I'm Jerry Boyer, and our guest today is Dr. Rick Gosen. Rick is founder of the Entrepreneurial Leadership Program at Wycliffe Hall, Oxford, and also the founder of the Entrepreneurial Leadership Organization, ELO, which is the most successful series of Christian entrepreneurial conferences in the world. He's the author of numerous books. We're talking about one of them today. That I will not guarantee that we won't end up talking about others of the books. No guarantees in advance, but officially we're talking about Public Speaking Laws of Success. Public Speaking Laws of Success for everyone and every occasion. Rick, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot for that introduction, and I'm very much looking forward to our conversation, and we might even have a few laughs along the way.
Me too, right, but you have to be careful. Don't tell any jokes, because jokes are dangerous. And that's actually a decent place to start. As I think about people who are considering doing public speaking or doing it, they're often afraid. And I don't think they're afraid of failing to be 99th percentile. I don't think they're afraid that they won't hit it out of the park. I think they're afraid that they'll strike out. So kind of speaking to their felt need before we kind of go on to how to be excellent, probably it would be helpful for people just for you to kind of focus on the blowing it characteristics. What are the 4 or 5 things that if you do this, that you're really increasing your left tail risk, your risk of blowing it? What would you put on that list from your rules?
Well, I think to succeed in public speaking, first of all, to not be nervous, I think you should have appropriate expectations. So don't assume you'll get in front of a crowd. Maybe it's one of your first times and you'll be funny like Jerry Seinfeld and you'll be JFK. You'll be all these people wrapped into one on your first swing at the bat. I mean, it doesn't happen that way. So set some appropriate expectations. What I always tell people is if you follow some basic rules, there's a limit to how far wrong you can go. So you follow some basic rules and you'll be better than 90% of all public speakers you ever hear. So simple things like start on time, end on time. Figure out how much time you've got, be very clear on that, and then have an appropriate structure. So you need an introduction, you need a conclusion, maybe you have 3 points in the middle, then you need some symmetry. If you've got 15 minutes, well, 2 minutes for an intro, 2 minutes for the close, 4 minutes for each point. Don't have a misshapen beast. A few other basic things. You're not going up there to try to be funny. So we were discussing this. One of the laws in the book is humor is no joke. Don't get up there and start with, well, there's a story about 3 guys walking along the road, and one guy has a limp and one guy has one eye, and everybody knows this is from, the book of 1,000 jokes to tell when you're doing a presentation. The people who are truly funny, if you think of comedians, everybody from Jerry Seinfeld to Robin Williams to everybody in between, they hone their craft for years upon years and thousands of presentations in order to develop their sense of timing. So what would make you think you can just get up there and tell a joke and everybody will burst out laughing? That's what I call a high risk maneuver. So to do well, have a symmetry, be clear, avoid the major pitfalls, and speak from the heart, and you'll be better off than 90% of all speakers.
What have you seen? And this is one of the interesting things about this book. You have a lot of negative examples from your own experience. Now,
sorry, Jerry, you have to be I like the way you put that. You have a lot of negative examples from your own experience. Would you like to clarify that?
From your experience as a host, rather than as a speaker.
Experience observing others.
The names are omitted to protect the guilty. So that's helpful. So there's a lot of that. And I think that's good because I think people are afraid of blowing it. So where do people usually blow it that you've actually seen in your experience? Where do speakers, and we can divide between inexperienced speakers and experienced speakers, because experienced speakers can blow it too. But let's start off with the amateurs. Where do amateurs usually blow it that you've seen?
Right. Well, first of all, just this issue of many negative examples in the book, we discussed previously that the book is based on my frustration of having sat through a lot of presentations where these laws have been violated. And I think it doesn't have to be so. So in terms of how, let's say, a novice speaker cannot blow it, there's really basic things. So just ask yourself, first of all, like whatever place you're speaking, ask yourself, why am I speaking here? What purpose am I serving by getting in front of these people? Now, you might think, well, Rick, that is so stupidly obvious. Well, I'll give you an example. You're an MC at a wedding. Is the wedding about you? No. Who is it about? Bride and groom. So now, again, you and me saying it sounds like, well, this is like grade 1. I mean, this is so simple. So it's about the bride and groom. So what are you supposed to be doing? You are supposed to be facilitating the wedding and keep the focus on the bride and groom and ensure that their day is memorable and that the event is about them. How many weddings have you been to where all you can remember is the MC making a massive fool of themselves and thinking that this is their one chance for glory, where they get to MC this and it's all about them. And they are going to be, it's like somebody's uncle or third cousin. They are going to be the funniest MC. I mean, I've been at so many weddings where the MCs, it was like their one chance for prime time in their entire life.
They think there's a talent scout there in the audience someplace.
Yeah,
and they can get out of their day job.
Yeah, they must have read that, a plumber was discovered at a wedding being an MC, and now he's, whomever.
Yeah.
So a simple thing like, what's the purpose? And now another thing, follow instructions. So I've been at church events where, I'll give you a quick example. Myself and one other person, we're supposed to speak for 4 minutes prior to the dinner starting at a Christmas banquet. We were supposed to share one memory from our childhood about Christmas. So I went up there, I talked about some caroling experience, 4 minutes. I sat down. The lady after me got up. She had 4 minutes, and this was right before the meal was to be served at a hotel banquet. This happened to be in Hong Kong at the time. Anyways, she gets up there. The first thing she says, which struck fear into the hearts of the organizers and everybody there, said, I know they gave me 4 minutes, but the Lord has laid something on my heart.
Oh, no.
And then I tell you, shoot me now or shoot me later. So 30 minutes later, she finished the story that the Lord laid on her heart. Well, the Lord laid on my heart the spirit of excellence. And we try to emulate.
And covenant keeping, like 4 minutes. You agreed to 4 minutes.
Yeah, you agreed to 4 minutes, but I was subject to the Lord instructing me to speak for 30.
Should there be a whole wing of the failed speech experiments that is powered by a kind of a sense of entitlement grounded in religiosity? In other words, if I have a strong religious emotion, then I feel like I can capture you and hijack you from my strong religious emotion because it's God after all. God told me to say this, and therefore you've got to sit through it. And I'm going to make you feel guilty if you don't react emotionally to the way that God instructed me to make you react emotionally.
Yeah, that is such a great example. I still remember, I don't know if you remember a singer named Larry Norman.
Yes.
Yeah. So I remember as a teenager going to one of his concerts. He got up there, he started off, well, I want to share something the Lord laid on my heart. So he talks and talks. I think he went on for almost an hour. Then he said at one point, if you're tired of listening to me, you're tired of God. I still remember as a teenager, I felt like shouting out, no, we paid to hear you sing, not to talk.
Yeah.
But this religiosity, provides this veneer and then this excuse for you to do what you want. So when it comes to public speaking, of course, you and I both know, we spoke in many places. The Lord loves excellence. The spirit of excellence was within Daniel, because of his excellence, right. He had a lot of influence. So we can get him. And we also know this is one of the great myths about public speaking. The more you say, they think people will retain more. The reality is the more you speak, the less they retain. The faster you speak, the less they retain.
They have an attention budget and they have a memory budget. They have a neurotransmitter budget. right? And you go over that, like you go past that bucket, it's just going to run out onto something else. So if you want to make sure they take it home, then you have to stay under that to be confident that they're going to be able to take it away from the speech.
Yeah, and we know the great speakers have this balance of pace and momentum. So on the one hand, they have a certain pace to their speaking. So it's not drab, it's not monotone. I like to think it's a little bit like I'm speaking now. A little bit of a slight bit of enthusiasm and energy, but at the same time, not talking a mile a minute. If you listen to most great speakers, if I'm sure you've heard John Maxwell speak. John Maxwell speaks like this. Hi, I'm John. Today I'm going to share 3 points. The first one is, and of course his voice has gotten deeper over time. It's amazing. But him, Tim Keller, so many great speakers. How many great speakers can you think of who spoke quickly? There's many who spoke emphatically and with great intonation and lots of techniques, but there's not a lot. Like if you listen to great speakers, it's phenomenal. They all speak, I would say in measured tones, and they use silence well. But that's a bit.
So I would probably distinguish here between speakers and sermons, because in some traditions, like Pentecostal tradition, I've seen some great preaching where they talk very quickly. And it's like the Spirit is pouring out of them. But sermons are a little different. And you have a chapter about sermonic sermonizing. Yes. So sermonic speaking. So why don't you talk about that a little bit, since we're in kind of church world here?
Well, in this book on public speaking, there's a couple of chapters that relate to that Christians might find of particular interest. So the one on sermonizing. So I say at the outset of that chapter that I've probably listened to over 2,000 sermons. Again, not claiming that it's improved my character commensurately, but in any event, I've listened to 2,000. And I'd say there's this basic difference in how people do a sermon. There's the stereotypes of a good sermon, which are, you have your main point or your thesis, your 3 supporting points, good examples, you wrap it up, tie a bow on it, it's good. So I'd subscribe to that's the way to approach it. Too many sermons that I hear, in my mind, they're a string of 40 disconnected points. So if I thought of it on a piece of paper, it would be a series of 40 bullet points. All sort of interesting, different examples, but not a cohesive whole. So with a sermon, if you ask people after you've heard a sermon, okay, can you tell me so this is a simple test. What was the title? I don't remember.
Something about God.
Yeah, I think it was God or Jesus. I'm sure it was something about
one of them at least was mentioned, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. So what was the title? What was the main point? What were the 3 points? That example that you remember, what does it relate to? Well, so to do a good sermon, you really need structure and symmetry. And sermons are unique because most of the people you're speaking to have heard you speak previously, if not many times, and they have an idea as to what a good sermon should sound like. When we go to hear an astrophysicist talk about his or her subject matter, okay, we probably haven't heard that before. But for most of us, when we listen to a sermon, we might have heard literally hundreds. So the bar is quite high, and people might also be relatively familiar with the source text. So if you're speaking about the Christmas story, the prodigal son, well, we already know the story. We might think we understand it. So to me, doing a sermon, the key thing is it's the structure, the balance, and like any good presentation, it's having a main point. Again, John Maxwell's got a great line. Was it professors take the simple and make it complex? Communicators take the complex and make it simple. And I think a good communicator as a pastor can get a profound message across, but it's very clearly delivered. Whereas I find sometimes, like pastors, they might be quoting, so-and-so said this, and this theologian said this and that. And they're losing people in the weeds because people didn't know who the names of those theologians anyways. Like they want to have something that's insightful, practical. What do I take away?
You're listening to the Edify Podcast Network. We'll be right back. This podcast is part of the Edify Podcast Network. Edify is a faith-inspiring app that brings together thousands of the best Christian podcasts in one place for your listening enjoyment. Cut through the noise and grow your faith by diving into the world's top Christian podcasts today. Download the Edify app for free from the App Store or Google Play, or by going to edify.app. That's EDIFI.app. This is the Edify Podcast Network. Welcome back.
I'm reminded of a quote. I won't get it exactly right. It sort of fits with your point about is the speech about me, or is it about the audience, or about the ideas? And there was a kind of a backhanded compliment. I won't get the names right, but it's something like when Cicero speaks, people say, "What a fine speaker." When Cato speaks, people say, "Let us march on Carthage." And there's a sense in which, and you talked about this, alluded to it, I think, that people get a sense that I'm going to go out there and this is my chance, and I'm going to be, they're going to aim to be a great speaker. But if you aim to be a great speaker, you probably won't be a great speaker. It comes through that you're trying to soak up the attention for yourself. It's about you, as opposed to being so focused away from yourself that people don't think that was a great speaker. People think differently about the idea. People go away and they say, I'm going to do something differently than if I had not heard that speech.
Yeah, that's such a great way to put it, because, if you're a speaker, you're really serving the audience and trying to convey some message to the audience, but actually, somewhat ironically, not have it focused on you. So it's almost like in a lot of aspects of life, like if you're a referee, well, if you've done a great job reffing a game, people won't remember there was a ref, right? So your mark of success is that nobody remembered. Or if you MC a wedding and people go, wow, that was such a great wedding. But you know what? When the MC does a lousy job, what happens? You're driving home going, that MC, what a knucklehead. You're just talking about how the guy muffed it. But if the guy did a good job, or the man or woman did a good job,
you're not talking about them.
You don't even remember who the MC was.
Failure stands out.
Yeah.
Failure sticks, right? And that's why it's so important to avoid failure, even if that means you're not taking the kind of risks which might lead to a great speech, or might, like, you and I are both in finance and investing. So there are investments which are much more likely to give you a high return, and they're also much more likely to give you a very low return. They're high volatility, right? Emerging markets, small caps, penny stocks would be an example, cryptocurrencies. These are like, so people tend to think, is there a good investment or a bad investment? And there's really something more like there are investments that have a lot of variation, high risk, high return. And okay, so if it's not imperative for your career to hit the ball out of the park, or you're not experienced, you should probably not swing for the fences. Yeah, maybe bunt or just try to get on first base, and then you're not risking the whole enterprise, and you're not putting your host in an awkward position.
Yeah, avoid the high risk maneuvers. There's no reason to pursue those. If you follow the basics, you will be better than 90% of all speakers, guaranteed.
Got it. Now, you preach that to someone. I take risks like crazy. So I don't follow that rule. The rule that I just laid out there for people to follow and asked you to express as a public speaker, personally, I tend to take the risk. But
you know what I'd say, Jerry? Like, in your career, I'm sure you didn't start off that way. And I would compare it to, okay, being Canadian, we always think in terms of hockey, Wayne Gretzky. Okay, if you're Wayne Gretzky, you can do anything you want on the ice. But you know what? When Wayne Gretzky started off, he needed to do the fundamentals, good skating, passing, shooting, all these things. Once you get further along, then you can do those high risk things, and you can, tell jokes, or you have a certain style. So there's things that I'd say are the upper level skills. So as an example, using silence. I love using silence because you make a point and then you just make the point and you stop and you just wait 2-3 seconds. To an inexperienced speaker,
that's terrifying. 2 to 3 seconds feels like half an hour.
Oh yeah. You couldn't do it. But one thing you learn when you have experience is there's the power of silence. Like it's such a great feeling as a speaker when you're silent and you've got a room of 1,000 people and you could literally hear a pin drop. But I would say when you're starting off, just try to have good pace, good momentum, stick with the basics. And one thing I'd mention that I forgot to mention earlier is, the importance of the hook. So when you're starting off as a speaker, you have to be so careful about the first 1 minute. And in the book, I talk about the 1 minute test. And to some extent, and I also talk about the most dangerous 15 seconds.
Yeah.
But, when you get up there, people watch you walk up and they'll have certain expectations, thoughts in their head. Maybe you're a lunchtime or evening speaker. They might be full of food. They might be having their coffee. Who knows what they're thinking? So everybody in their mind is thinking, even if they're positive, but all of a somewhat, well, what's this person going to say? Like, and they might not articulate it this way, but we're all sort of thinking, well, is this person worth listening to? So you don't have a lot of time. So when you get up there, you have to have some hook. What can you say that will get their attention? So this can be as simple as, let me tell you, when I first arrived in Hong Kong in 1985, it was the most important day of my life, but I didn't know it at the time. I was going to a meeting with, and maybe we've all been in that situation where we're anticipating what may come, but we don't, and then you're like, oh, Hong Kong, what's that about? Or you go, there's some factoid, some fact you've come up with.
Right.
Or you say, Winston Churchill once said, well, you can never go wrong. There's how many people? JFK, Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln.
Martin
there's
Luther
a handful of people.
Yeah.
You can never go wrong quoting, let's say, Winston Churchill, right? What did Winston Churchill have to say? Well, then you got people's attention. So, but you don't have to be cute. So you don't have to start off by saying, well, there's a story about 2 guys and a donkey and a horse. And I've been at those too many times where, the guy goes through the lines, it falls flat. You don't know that the joke was over, and it's extraordinarily awkward, embarrassing.
Jokes are for pros. That doesn't necessarily mean humor is for pros, but jokes are for professionals.
Well, see, this is where, so if somebody's listening to this, they might think, well, hey, Rick and Jerry seem to have a sense of humor. So what's with the no joke thing? Well, that's exactly it, Jerry. Like the difference between humor and a joke, to me, a joke is a bit of a canned, like it's a joke that someone has come up with and you're usually repeating it and it's got a certain punchline. But, humor, what I found is, I think that a good approach towards humor is you're telling stories, you're sharing things. I may think they're funny, but I don't pause for the laugh. Like I might be describing a situation and you know what, if people laugh, bonus. If not, it doesn't disrupt my flow. So I'm not, I don't say something and then lean forward with a note of expectation on my face, waiting for everybody to laugh. No, I just say something, just keep moving on. And I find often the funniest, like not everybody can do this, but if you're, let's say, quick-witted or a bit of a witty person, I find if you say something during the course of your speech, that can often get a big laugh, like when it's completely spontaneous.
Right.
Now, if I explain some of these things to people afterwards, they go, but that's not even close to funny. Well, at the time, something happens and you just blurt out some remark and then people start laughing because they know it's spur of the moment. So I'd say don't, use humor.
And they give you benefit of the doubt if it's spur of the moment. If you are going to hijack 60 seconds to 90 seconds of their life for a joke following the structure of the joke, like the standard, a minister, a rabbi, and a priest go into a bar, right?
I've heard that.
You heard that one, right? And the bartender says, what is this, a joke? If you're going to hijack them then you have to have the payoff. That it's required. But somebody drops something or there's thunder, right? And you say something like, "Oh, maybe God didn't like that." That doesn't work. It's like, okay, because they know that you're kind of improvising here a little bit. And so they'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but they will not give you the benefit of the doubt for a joke, especially one of those long story jokes that takes 3 to 5 minutes, which is an eternity in a speech.
Well, and I would say like a joke or a story, and of course, storytelling is such a big part of public speaking. The joke or the story must fit in with the point of your presentation. So I've listened to a sermon one time. The pastor told a joke and then everybody laughed. And he said, "Well, it doesn't actually fit in with what I'm going to talk about, but I thought it was funny." And I remember thinking, that's hubris defined.
You thought it was funny.
Yeah. You have a captive audience on a Sunday morning and you just thought some random joke was funny. So one thing I talk about in the book is, abuse of platform. And this often happens, like you and I have been invited to, many places to speak. And, it's quite a solemn obligation. I'd say sacred obligation.
I think so. Yeah.
You get up on the platform and most organizers will not come and tackle you and physically throw you off the stage. So basically you're up there and to some extent you can do what you want. You can say what you want.
You're a little dictator there, maybe they can do a coup against you, but that's extreme. So you're like a dictator over your 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to exercise, a lot of, say, self-control and not not waste people's time, not tell useless jokes, that type of thing. So you really have to stay, focused. And again, remember.
I like this phrase you just used, a captive audience. Every audience is a captive audience in some sense, right? Because it's a big deal to get up and walk out, right? And it's a big deal for the organizers to give you the hook, right? So basically, except for extraordinary circumstance, except for and if you're not going to make people very uncomfortable, they are your captives, right? And one thing that really bothers me as part of the captive audience is when someone doesn't understand that I'm there and I'm a little bit trapped. And partly it's my wiring because I'm maybe a little ADD and a little claustrophobic, so I'm probably feeling more trapped than most people. But everybody's trapped to some degree. So you think about this, and it's like you're taking 40 minutes or an hour of my time. It's like, no, if there's 500 people, you're taking 500 hours.
Yeah.
This should be worth it. And if you're just up there and just saying whatever you think or just like filling out the time, I personally, as a member of the audience, I'm a terrible audience member. I'm judgmental and intolerant and everything. If you're capturing 500 hours and you're just kind of winging it or lollygagging, that offends me because time is sacred in some sense.
Yeah. Oh no, and it should. And that relates to people going over time. So there's the time you've gotten, but like for example, most of us, we allocate time to maybe go to a luncheon, maybe go to a conference. But let's take a breakfast or a luncheon. You've got other things to do that day. So let's say the event is scheduled, 7:30 to 9 a.m., something like that. Well, you've got to get to the office. So all of a sudden the speaker gets up there, speaker had maybe 20 minutes, then they're going to do a 5-minute wrap up. Then the speaker starts going over time. Well, I'm the type of person that I'll just get up and leave. And other people will think that, but I don't have a problem getting up to leave. Now, of course, we can be understanding and kind and all those things, and we do that to some extent. But the reality is, I've been here for an hour and a half. I have lots of other things to do. You told me it was going to be an hour and a half, be done by 9. And if it goes later, sorry, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. So I'm just getting up and walking out. And so for speakers, the great speakers, when I have them at events and stuff, so all of us say, exactly how long do you want me to speak for? If I say 23 minutes and 15 seconds, good speakers will always go, absolutely. You tell me, is it 30 minutes,
right,
20, whatever the number is, I will speak to the second. And that really shows, you're a professional, because if you can do that, then you have a sense of timing, self-organization. And even if you're more of a novice speaker, well, you can still have your iPhone up there looking at your clock. This is not complicated
and
stuff.
And maybe add the skill of being able to end a little early, because generally with conferences, unless you're the first speaker, generally by the second or third speaker, they're running behind because people have gone long. So
Yeah.
if you have the optionality of knocking 3 or 4 minutes off the end, your hosts will love you if you can help put them on track. All right, speaking of allotted time, I'm getting the signal from Susan that we've reached our allotted time. So Rick, next time, let's come back and talk about not just speaking in general, but we're now in the world of Zoom and GoToMeeting and Microsoft Teams. There's a shift, a fundamental shift has taken place within the past year. And I know you've done a lot of thinking about that because you've done a lot of practicing of that. So can we talk about that next time?
Oh, that would be great. And the key thing is, it's all the basic rules apply, but at the same time, there's many nuances. So you have to treat it like a specific medium, and doing it well will definitely separate you from the pack.
We've been talking with Dr. Rick Goosen, author of Public Speaking: Laws of Success. And we'll come back for our next episode, continuing our conversation with Dr. Goosen. Thanks so much for being with us.